She thought she'd take my fortune, but our inspiring secret with the deaf cook was revealed. Sarah Johnson stood in the cramped kitchen of the Johnson Diner, the heart and soul of her small Midwestern town. The oil-slicked counter felt cold beneath her fingers, a stark contrast to the warmth she once felt from the diner's bustling atmosphere. Now, every day felt like a battle against the sleek, corporate vultures circling overhead. They were waiting for her to slip, for her to falter so they could swoop in and consume what had once been a cherished family legacy. The thought clenched her stomach tight. Her new boss, a corporate shark in a crisp suit, had zero tolerance for the nostalgic recipes and homemade charm that Sarah had inherited from her family. All she heard from him were numbers and margins, as if her love for cooking mattered less than the spreadsheet in front of him. "Get with the program, Sarah," he'd said, his insatiable need for profit suffocating her creativity. How was she supposed to conjure warmth and love on a plate with such relentless pressure? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Days turned into endless shifts behind the fryer, a grind that replaced her passion with doubt. Fragments of the laughter she shared with Mr. Thompson floated back to her, his steadfast presence and wisdom offering a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. The retired chef had taught her more than just techniques. He was her connection to the essence of cooking, the love that infused each recipe. Yet how could she honor that without losing her job? With every glance at the corporate agenda, her heart sank deeper into a void of despair. Was she fighting for her family, or simply trying to keep her head above water? The moment a lavish corporate event turned disastrous, her confidence shattered. Dishes she had lovingly crafted received grueling critiques, her mistakes laid bare in front of her boss. It was suffocating, a pit deepening in her stomach as she felt the weight of humiliation crush her spirit. She had let her team down. That much was painfully clear. Each accusation hung in the air, sharp like knives. Did she even belong here anymore? As she rummaged through the clutter of Mr. Thompson's past within the diner, her fingers brushed against a hidden treasure, the family recipe book. As the pages turned, rich stories sprang to life, all filled with love, resilience, and culinary artistry. But with newfound hope came a relentless barrage of fear. The stakes were immeasurable. With every dish she envisioned for the cook-off, she worried it might never measure up against her boss's profit-driven agenda. Could she amalgamate her heritage with Mr. Thompson's wisdom in a single competition? Amidst the kitchen's usual chaos, Sarah stood on the cusp of reclaiming her dreams, but the looming threat of her boss snuffed out her breath. Would the pressure crush her, or would she find a way to define her own path with each flick of the spatula? As she measured spices, doubt tangled with the flickers of determination. The cook-off was nearing, and every dish would not only represent her, but her family, a legacy in the making. Would she seize the opportunity or let it slip through her fingers? As the clock on the diner's wall ticked relentlessly, Sarah flipped through the gilt-edged pages of the family recipe book, deciphering her ancestors' ink as if it were a map to redemption. Each recipe bore a history of triumph, a crystallization of unwavering resolve, yet now it felt like an insurmountable weight pressing down on her. She could hear the corporate laughter of her boss echoing mockingly in her head, drowning out the wisdom Mr. Thompson had imparted. Uncertainty settled thickly in her throat. What was once a sanctuary of creativity morphed into a battleground where her culinary instincts clashed with sterile efficiency. Each dish she considered for the cook-off transformed from a personal expression into a potential risk with real consequences. Could a corn chowder, rich with her grandmother's techniques, truly compete with the fast-tracked innovations her boss relished? Sarah questioned her place in this harsh new atmosphere. Slick surfaces and fluorescent lights surrounded her, a cruel reminder that the warmth of familial ties felt distanced from this cold corporate space. But as she froze her fears in place, she felt a solitary flicker, an ember of motivation sparked by the weight of expectation. The cook-off loomed, yes, but it also offered an opportunity to infuse her signature style into the very heart of the diner. It would be a chance to reclaim her kitchen. Determination coursed through her veins as she gathered the ingredients for that nostalgic corn chowder. The laughter and stories shared over meals inspired her. She envisioned a dish that told her family's story, layering it with the wisdom she had gained from Mr. Thompson. This was not merely a recipe. This was an act of defiance, a way to fuse heart with hustle. As the vegetables sizzled in the pot, the aroma of corn and spices began to fill the kitchen, dancing like whispers of encouragement around her. With each chop, each stir, she rose to confront the gnawing doubt that threatened to cripple her spirit. Each spoonful held not only the essence of family, but her defiance against the cold corporate machine. This was her creation. Her hands moving expertly, she realized something vital. It wasn't just about the cook-off. It was about identifying her place in the world as a cook and a creator. She could rewrite the narrative that her boss enforced. This realization painted new strokes on her canvas, emboldening her to explore other dishes that fused family recipes with modern twists, creating a menu that bridged the past and the present, something uniquely hers. But just as she found footing in this fragile hope, her boss walked in. Spotting the bubbling pot of corn chowder, his eyes narrowed, sizing up the simmering dish with thinly veiled condescension. "You working on a new gimmick?" he said, a sarcastic edge slipping into his tone. Sarah swallowed hard, a wave of vulnerability crashing over her. This was the moment she had dreaded, the confrontation that felt inevitable. Would she retreat and fall back into her shell, or would she stand firm, allowing her culinary artistry to speak for her? To Sarah's surprise, her heart raced not with fear, but clarity. This was it, the moment where she would redefine herself through her passion, displaying a resilience that had been stifled for too long. As her pulse quickened, Sarah felt the resolve crystallizing. "Actually, yes. I'm working on something that highlights our family's essence," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension lining the air. The corners of her boss's mouth twitched, revealing bemusement. Perhaps she had thrown him off balance. Could this be a moment of change? Yet as she prepared to delve deeper, the door swung open, pulling her attention to the diner's entrance. A sudden, unannounced visitor stood there, casting a long shadow across her burgeoning moment of empowerment. Who had wandered in, and what impact would they have on Sarah's fight to reclaim her legacy? The door swung open with a creak that peeled Sarah's attention away from her boss and right into the gauzy haze of uncertainty. Standing in the doorway was a woman, drenched in late-afternoon sunlight, her silhouette framed by the amber glow spilling through the glass. It took Sarah a moment to recognize her. It was Clara, an old friend from culinary school who had disappeared from their tight-knit circle after graduation. What was she doing here? Clara stepped in, and for a heartbeat, the tension in the kitchen snapped like a taut string. Sarah's heart raced, a mix of joy and apprehension flooding her senses. She hadn't seen Clara in years, and yet a familiar pang of insecurity gripped her. Had the years been kind to her old classmate? "Sarah?" Clara called out, her voice buoyant and tinged with the enthusiasm that always seemed to radiate from her. "I heard the diner was buzzing again. I couldn't resist dropping by to see what you've created." Sarah's breath hitched, caught somewhere between a long-overdue reconnect and a fear of judgment. This was Clara, the same person who had dazzled their professors with her innovative techniques, someone whose presence now felt like both a warm embrace and a looming challenge. "Hey, Clara," Sarah managed, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. While the two shared polite conversation, the dynamic shifted like the tide, and Sarah found herself involuntarily comparing their journeys. Clara had always been the one to take risks. She'd been bold in the kitchen, pushing boundaries with daring flavor combinations and plating aesthetics that commanded attention. In contrast, Sarah had been the craftsman, carefully nurturing her roots and essence until she had allowed the corporate atmosphere to dull her edge. The more they chatted, the clearer it became how much Clara had flourished. She spoke of her travels, from culinary workshops in Italy to staging under Michelin-starred chefs in New York. With every detail, Sarah felt a pang. She had remained stagnant, tethered to a place that had begun to feel like quicksand. But Clara's enthusiasm didn't wane, and soon her observation swayed away from her own accomplishments to the simmering pot behind Sarah. "What's on the menu today? It smells incredible," she asked, leaning forward. Suddenly, the weight of expectation surged again. The corn chowder bubbled enticingly, a physical representation of everything Sarah felt within. "It's a corn chowder," she replied, a hint of pride lacing her tone. "A family recipe, revamped slightly." Clara's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "I see you're channeling some nostalgia. What inspired you?" This question hung in the air, electric with unspoken potential. Sarah wanted to yell out about the stories behind the recipe, to share how each spoonful contained memories of her family, bold flavors infused with daring, yet all she offered was the clipped, just trying to mix it up. She caught a flicker of disappointment in Clara's gaze, anchored by the pivot her words had made. It was as if she were diverting Clara away from the essence of who she truly was and what this dish truly meant. Sarah felt a sudden urge to reclaim the moment, her thoughts racing faster than her heartbeat. She wanted to share the vibrant heart of her heritage, the whispers of her ancestors embodied in the kitchen, to merge ambition with tradition. "No, honestly," she found herself saying, the words fluid and unwavering. "It's a piece of my life that I want to bring back. My grandmother used to make this for us as a way of celebrating." As she spoke, she sensed the shifting tide once more. This wasn't just about the cook-off. It was reopening the door to her own narrative, the passion she thought she'd locked away. Yet as she locked eyes with Clara, a second wave of vulnerability washed over her, because this wasn't just reclaiming her voice. It was the realization that her past could be a launching point into something greater. But before she could delve deeper, her boss's voice sliced through the air once again. "This isn't culinary school, ladies. We don't need a history lesson. We need results." The chill that accompanied his words extinguished the light in the room, reminding Sarah that she was still standing in the very battle she had sought to change. Would she let his arrogance snuff out the fire she had finally kindled? As she glanced at Clara, something in her friend's expression sparked a resolve. Perhaps Clara's arrival was an unexpected lifeline. If she used this moment wisely, she could negotiate not only for her culinary passions, but for her very identity in the kitchen. The door to reclaiming her legacy had just opened wider. Would she step through it with newfound courage, or would she be confined to the shadows? Sarah sensed the looming decision ahead, one that prompted her to question the price of her vulnerability amidst a stifling environment. Where would this new direction lead her, and could she risk all in that pursuit? Caught in the midst of her swirling thoughts, Sarah's breath steadied as she turned back to Clara. The weight of expectation hung in the air, thicker than the cream simmering in the chowder. A rush of determination broke through her earlier hesitation. It surged like steam rising from boiling pots. "Can you help me?" she blurted out, surprising even herself with the admission. The question hung, ripe with potential. Clara leaned closer, intrigued. "Help you? With what?" I want to reinvent this menu, bring back the heart of what cooking used to mean to me, but I'm stuck. Your experiences, your insights, maybe you could guide me?" Clara's face lit up, her smile radiating warmth. "Absolutely. I've seen so many different concepts, and there's so much potential here." A brief sparkle flickered in her eyes, but then a shadow of concern crossed her features. "Is this your boss's idea, or your own?" "It's mine," Sarah replied, finding her voice. But he won't take me seriously just because I had a slight overhaul. Then let's prove him wrong. Clara's conviction reinvigorated Sarah, igniting a spark within her that had lain dormant. The shift realized its power, and she latched onto Clara's energy as though it were a life raft amid turbulent waves. Okay, Sarah steadied herself. Let's work together. You can help me come up with innovative twists we can try without straying too far from the roots. I can't afford to push boundaries too aggressively, but I'm ready to fight for what I believe in. Clara nodded, and they quickly dove into creative brainstorming, the din of the kitchen fading into a blur around them. Each idea flowed freely, spurred by Clara's perspective. The juxtaposition of their culinary styles began merging into something extraordinary, familiar yet adventurous. The collaboration transformed the once pretentious atmosphere into a vibrant atmosphere where tastes and stories intertwined. Yet, even amidst this blossoming connection, a gnawing anxiety twisted in Sarah's stomach. Would her boss dismiss these efforts, seeing only failure where she dared to find strength? As her fingers swiftly chopped the vegetables, doubts unfurled in her mind. The fear of ridicule loomed large and oppressive, but it was outweighed by the encouragement Clara offered. With each dish they crafted, a mantra began to form in Sarah's heart. This was more than just a meal. It was a narrative waiting to unfold. She envisioned every plate telling a story, revealing a piece of her culture, her history, and perhaps an insight into her own character. When she stepped back to observe their handiwork, her heart swelled with pride. She turned to Clara, her best friend from a simpler time, bearing witness to her awakening. "I'm going to present this to him," she declared, conviction resonating in her voice. Clara raised an eyebrow, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You really think he'll accept this?" "Why not? Everything in this kitchen is seasoned with my past. I want him to taste it." As Sarah arched forward, the tension from earlier melted, replaced by an electrifying determination. She was embarking on a journey to reclaim her culinary voice, to intertwine the past with the present, an opportunity to stand firm, wielding truth as both shield and sword. But as their brainstorming session wound down and the realization of her impending pitch settled in the pit of her stomach, doubt flickered again. What if her boss rejected her offerings? What if he took away her chance to reclaim her space? As anxiety wormed its way back into her thoughts, the question loomed. Would she have the courage to present herself authentically at the risk of losing everything she fought to reclaim? A new battle was brewing in Sarah's heart. Boldness whispered the promise of identity. Fear murked the waters of uncertainty. The tension crackled in the air as she looked at Clara. It was undeniable. Change was brewing, but at what cost? Would she find her strength to present her truth, or would her fears swallow her once again? As Sarah stared at the gleaming array of dishes lined up across their station, a fire ignited within her. It wasn't merely a presentation of flavors, it was an act of reclamation. The dishes told her story, elements of her family's heritage woven within a tapestry of contemporary culinary techniques. Yet, as bold as her inspiration felt, a gnawing apprehension weighed heavily in her chest. "Maybe we should pick one standout dish to present first," Clara suggested, sensing Sarah's mounting tension. "Something that encapsulates everything you want to convey?" Clara's steadying voice sliced through Sarah's chaos. "You're right." She paused, letting a mix of nostalgia and determination surface. "Then it has to be the clam chowder. It's a classic, but we'll add a twist that speaks to my experience and memory." They brainstormed variations, incorporating flavors from Sarah's childhood, using fresh herbs and exotic spices Clara would suggest. With each revision, Sarah felt more in control. Each choice echoed her narrative, heritage infused with innovation. As they whipped together a trial batch, the clatter of culinary tools punctuated the bubbling anticipation in the air. "Your passion is contagious," Clara remarked, observing Sarah's spirited execution. "I just want him to see what I see," Sarah responded, her eyes narrowing as focus narrowed. To see me, not just what he thinks I can do. As the clock ticked closer to their scheduled presentation, the kitchen transformed. The hustle and bustle felt invigorating rather than oppressive. Sarah's hands deftly adjusted seasonings, her confidence blossoming even as somewhere deep inside lurked the familiar specter of self-doubt. But the shadow created by her boss loomed large, a figurative specter in the corner of her mind. What if he reduced her efforts to mere novelty? As she plated the vibrant chowder, the tradition of her family clashing with contemporary expectations, hesitations resurfaced. "Are you ready to face him?" Clara asked, her voice steady, cutting through Sarah's spiraling thoughts. The question struck at the core of Sarah's fears. "I think so. No, I must be." Determination brightened her visage momentarily. Yet the previous thrill tinged with dread as she thought about how her boss viewed challenges like these. A threat, perhaps. Would he see her ambition as unwarranted overreach? They stepped into the meeting space, the professional atmosphere additional layers of pressure now changing the air. Simon, her boss, sat at the table with a critical eye and crossed arms, clearly awaiting the presentation in a manner that made the tension palpable. As Sarah arranged the flavors across the table, her heart raced. Each component was the culmination of her aspirations, but the doubt fought to creep back in. Would he appreciate the homage to her roots intertwining with creativity? Or would it seem like pretentious rebellion? "All right, I'm ready," she breathed, forcing the words past her nerves. Clara offered a reassuring nod, the weight of her encouragement steadying her resolve. With a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward and explained each element. The tender clams transcended by a subtle saffron essence, the unexpected garnish of fried herbs that drew out childhood memories. Describing the significance of every choice, she realized her narrative was not merely about the food, but about her journey, her identity. Simon listened, his expression inscrutable. Anxiety clawed at Sarah, binding her audacity with a raw fear of dismissal. Yet her beliefs surged stronger than her trepidations. She leaned into the authenticity of her feelings, voicing the heart behind the culinary rebirth. "What do you think?" she breathed as she completed her presentation. The room fell silent, the weight of expectation anchored firmly in Sarah's chest. Time felt suspended as Simon's gaze lingered over the chowder. Would he respect the culinary journey she'd taken, or would he dismiss it outright? Sarah stood at the precipice of possibility, teetering between fear and hope. Her heart raced as the clock ticked on this critical moment. This was no longer just about food, it was about asserting her identity. "Do I dare to dream?" she asked herself as she readied for his response, the tension crackling around them with consequences that could shift the very trajectory of her career. Would he be the one to bury her aspirations, or would he recognize the worthiness of her truth? The silence hung heavy in the air, suffocating in its weight. Sarah's mind raced as she stared at Simon, searching for a glimmer of validation amidst his neutral expression. Did he admire her culinary prowess, or was he merely biding his time to deliver a verdict that could fracture her carefully constructed confidence? Simon leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly drumming against the table. Sarah's heart sank. Was he contemplating a rejection, considering the risk of recognition? Every second felt like a countdown to her impending catastrophe, filled with flickering images of her ambitions collapsing in silence. "Well," Simon finally said, breaking the tension like glass shattering on the floor, "you certainly have a strong vision, Sarah. That much is clear." A breath she didn't realize she was holding escaped her lungs. The hesitation had turned into a surge of energy, igniting flickering embers of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a path where her passion could be seen, embraced rather than scorned. "I appreciate the homage," he continued, "but do you think it leans too heavily on nostalgia?" Her pulse quickened again, the precarious balancing act of passion and practicality weighing heavily on her mind. "Nostalgia is integral to my culinary identity," she responded cautiously, her voice beginning to steady. "It's not just about honoring the past, It's about the evolution that drives the future of my cooking. A flicker of interest crossed Simon's face. I see you've thought this out well. However, how does the modern diner relate to your experiences? This is fine dining after all. His words sliced through her burgeoning confidence, revealing the doubts she had fought to suppress. She fought the urge to retreat into safe explanations, choosing instead to channel the passion she had ignited earlier. This dish embodies a bridge between my heritage and innovative techniques. It's meant to comfort and surprise, to connect us through flavors while inviting exploration. Simon tapped his pen against his chin for what felt like an eternity. Your confidence might be your best ingredient here, Sarah, but there's a fine line between confidence and recklessness. With that, he stood up and walked toward the chowder, scrutinizing its presentation. Anxiety twisted in Sarah's stomach again. Would he deem it too risky? Each step felt agonizing, edged with uncertainty. Suddenly Simon turned, his brow furrowing slightly as he held his tasting spoon aloft. Are you prepared for critical feedback? You will need to navigate both acceptance and rejection in this industry, he stated, the weight of his words settling over her like a thick fog. Yes, as long as it helps me grow, Sarah declared, the fierce ambition coursing through her veins. She craved feedback, not just for the dish, but as a reflection of her journey. Good, he replied, offering her a fleeting glimpse of respect. But remember, this is a culinary battleground, and vulnerability can be your strength or your weakness. Embrace both, and you may not only create a remarkable dish, but also a defining moment in your career. With that, he lifted the spoon to his lips. The world slowed as she observed him intently, every minute detail ballooning into significance. What would his reaction reveal? Could this be the dawn of her validation or the dusk of her hopes? As Simon tasted, time warped in that silence, suspended between aspiration and impending judgment. The future of her ambitions teetered on the edge of a choice, a mingling of flavors, roots, and the spirit of rebellion. Would Simon's response be a stepping stone that propelled her forward, or would it crush her beneath the weight of his expectations? Time will reveal your true flavor within this industry, Sarah, he said at last, his face a canvas of inscrutable implications. Yet the implication was unmistakable. This was only the beginning of a further, unwritten conflict. Would she continue to fight for her voice, or would she yield to the conventions that threatened to squash her spirit? Determined, she squared her shoulders, mentally preparing for the next phase of her culinary journey. Perhaps it was time to confront the larger industry head-on, to navigate not just Simon's expectations, but the entire world outside these walls. Can I push further? Sarah wondered, a newfound resolve flooding her senses. What would her next move be in the culinary landscape teetering on the brink of challenge and belief? The battle had only just begun, and she felt the stirrings of a formidable quest unspooling in her mind. The seconds dragged by as Sarah grappled with Simon's cryptic feedback. Each word echoed in her mind, a challenge laced with potential. Could she really submit herself to the rigors of this industry and still express her authentic voice? Was her passion strong enough to withstand the scrutiny, or would it dissipate under the weight of conventional standards like so many fragile flavors? As Simon continued to scrutinize the broth, her thoughts began to spiral into a flurry of contemplation. The culinary world demanded more than just technical skills. It thrived on innovation and charisma. She realized she couldn't merely honor her past. She had to usher it into the present, adapting it for an audience that craved both nostalgia and novelty. "You're right," she said, her voice firming with clarity. "If I want to connect with modern diners, I need to push my boundaries." She had to craft dishes that would not only pay homage to her roots, but also stand as modern art on a plate. Simon placed the spoon down, his expression deceptively calm, and for a moment an uneasy silence recaptured the air between them. "So, what's your plan? How do you intend to evolve with these traditions?" His question was direct but layered with expectation. She sensed the subtle challenge in his voice. He wanted to see how deep her commitment ran. Sarah hesitated, her mind racing. Ideas danced in her head, possibilities unfolding like petals, each one more vibrant than the last. I think I need to start by reimagining menus. If I can thread threads of my family's history with seasonal ingredients, there's a way to tell a story that's not just mine, but also belongs to everyone who connects with it. How can I make food that resonates on a personal level? Each thought crystallized into a step forward in her evolution as a chef. Simon's brow lifted slightly, interest flickering in his eyes. Go on. His encouragement was delicate but firm. It's all about the experience, she continued, emboldened by the pulse of purpose coursing through her. Imagine a dinner where each course is tied to a story, a memory from my childhood blended with contemporary techniques. One course could evoke the warmth of family gatherings, while another captures the freshness of the local market. If it feels worth sharing, it can become a shared dining experience. Her heart raced, excitement bubbling up as the plan unfolded. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of potential reflected in Simon's eyes. That's ambitious, he stated, a hint of challenge sparking between them. But ambition must be backed by skill. How will you develop this concept further? His words echoed Sarah's internal monologue, igniting an urgency. She needed to crunch numbers for sourcing ingredients, refine each recipe to perfection, and create a cohesive narrative. There was no room for half measures. She felt her pulse quicken. This moment was a defining one, a pivotal instantiation of her culinary awakening. I will start by experimenting with fusion dishes, she declared, her determination solidifying into a plan of action. I'll take traditional recipes, deconstruct them, and let the essence breathe through contemporary flavors. Show me what that looks like, Simon challenged, an exhilarating light in his eyes. With each moment she embraced the challenge, the fear that had previously gripped her began to lose its hold. Confronting the task ahead ignited something within. She could almost taste the creativity spilling from her mind's eye onto the plates she would create. As she left the meeting, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. Navigating the complexities before her would require grit, certainly, but also unwavering authenticity. She needed to seek out mentors who believed in innovation without sacrificing tradition. Would her journey resonate, or would it only amplify the voices of those eager to silence her? With the resolve settling in her bones, Sarah stepped forward, leaving doubt behind. The culinary landscape stretched out before her like a blank canvas, awaiting the bold strokes of her aspirations. And inside, a growing conviction pulsed. The real question was no longer whether she would push forward. It was what else would she discover about herself in the process. As night fell, Sarah pondered the next steps with a new fervor. The hardest battles lay ahead, not just with the industry, but with her own self-doubt. The moment of truth was approaching, like a simmering pot ready to boil over. How would she confront the inner critic that had often dictated her limitations? Sarah awoke early, the soft light of dawn filtering through her kitchen window. Today marked the beginning of her transformation, and she could sense it in the air, a charged atmosphere tinged with excitement and uncertainty. The previous night's reflection had turned into a burning resolve. She was ready to step beyond the boundaries she had imposed on herself for so long. As she prepared her workstation, she could practically hear the echo of Simon's challenge reverberating through her mind. Could she truly bring her ideas to life in a way that would resonate with modern diners? She needed to form connections not just through food, but through stories. She envisioned her first fusion dish, a blend of her grandmother's traditional gumbo with Asian influences. It was a combination that might initially seem jarring, but held the potential for an explosion of flavors, each representing a part of her identity. With each chop of the knife, determination surged within her. But as she began to assemble the dish, doubt crept back in. What if the flavors didn't meld well? What if it turned out bland, unworthy of the ambitious vision that had sparked it? Clenching the knife a bit tighter, she scolded herself. Doubt was an enemy that could be fought. Reaching for the spices, Sarah recalled lessons from her past. Her grandmother would often say, "Cooking is about intuition, love, and a dash of daring." Embracing this mantra, she measured the ingredients with renewed vigor, letting instinct guide her rather than overthinking every detail. As the aromas married on the stove, she felt anticipation simmering in tandem. But she also needed to take a step back and analyze her process, to decipher which elements could elevate the dish further. Years of training had taught her the value of precision, yet she sensed that her culinary identity also lay in trusting her instincts. Would combining tradition with modernity run the risk of diluting both, or was it a means of honoring them both? Leaving the kitchen for a moment, Sarah flipped through her journal, pages filled with half-formed ideas and sketches of potential menus. With each passage, she recognized that she was at a crossroads. These pages were not just ideas. They were invitations to explore her creative identity. She decided she needed feedback, a sounding board that could see beyond her self-imposed limitations. Determined, she picked up the phone to call Clara, an experienced chef and a dear mentor. Clara had always encouraged Sarah to embrace her voice amidst the criticism. "You need to own your style," she would say, "or else you'll drown in someone else's vision." A meeting was set for later that afternoon. Sarah's stomach fluttered with both excitement and anxiety. She needed Clara's honest critique, but what if she didn't understand the vision? What if it was too avant-garde? Those familiar doubts returned, gnawing at her sanity. With the clock ticking down toward their appointment, Sarah hastily plated the gumbo, finishing the dish with a sprinkle of fresh herbs. As she took a step back to admire her work, something shifted within. This was her story, her influence brought to life through ingredients. For the first time, she didn't focus on what others would think, but rather on how this dish expressed her journey. When Clara arrived, Sarah felt a familiar connection, but also nerves like never before. "Let's see what you've been up to," Clara said, eyes glinting with curiosity. As Sarah presented her dish, her heart raced, vulnerable and exposed, but ready to embrace the impending critique. Would Clara see the threads of Sarah's history woven into this creation? Or would she merely see a fusion that failed to blend? "Here goes nothing," Sarah whispered to herself, letting the moment take hold. Behind the anticipation loomed her greatest fear. Would she ultimately discover strength in her voice, or would she find herself choking on apprehension? What Clara would say next might just set the course for her future. Sarah held her breath as Clara took her first bite, the tension palpable as she watched her mentor's facial expressions shift with each forkful. The moment felt like an eternity, each chew elongated as her mind raced through potential outcomes. The weight of her dreams hinged on this evaluation. Sensing vulnerability plunge through her body, she steadied herself, reminding herself that she intended to share her story, not just serve a plate. Clara's brow furrowed slightly, and for a fraction of a second, Sarah felt a surge of panic. Was the taste not what she had envisioned? Clara placed her fork down, studying Sarah's eyes, saying, "You have a gift for storytelling, but your flavors are competing rather than collaborating." The words stung at first, but deeper down, a flicker of truth sparked. Clara didn't dismiss her dish outright. Rather, she saw the essence of what Sarah was trying to accomplish. You need to refine and layer the flavors instead of having them shout over one another. It's about harmony, not cacophony. This feedback landed with the weight of a revelation. Sarah realized that she was still hiding behind her anxieties, allowing her doubts to create noise that masked her true potential. Clara's words were more than just critique. They were a roadmap toward authenticity. "Think of your grandmother's gumbo," Clara continued. "Each ingredient has a role, contributing to the whole. Don't fear letting one part be the star while others complement it." The metaphor lingered in Sarah's mind, translating not only to her culinary approach, but also to how she viewed her own journey. The fusion of her identities needed balance too. Her history as a chef and her desire to innovate didn't need to clash. They could coexist beautifully. Sarah's heart raced as fresh determination settled within her. What if I embrace silence? She pondered. Silence within the dish, allowing each component to speak clearly without drowning it in chaos. Applying this to her resume of experiences, she considered how she could frame her identity. The culinary artist steeped in tradition yet forward-looking, the designer of flavor but also of emotion. Let's work on that idea together, Clara suggested, observing Sarah's newfound resolve. We can explore flavor pairing techniques, find a way to make those notes sing in unison. A spark ignited within Sarah. This was an opportunity for growth, a space where she could revisit her passion for cooking while reworking her narrative. I could create a tasting menu that tells my story, Sarah declared, the realization crystallizing her focus. Each dish could reflect a piece of who I am, balancing tradition with a modern spin. The idea unfurled with clarity, and she began to frame a strategy in her mind. Clara's encouragement shifted the conversation toward practical applications, brainstorming ways to highlight Sarah's skills while delving into her familial influences. With the challenge set before her, Sarah felt invigorated, ready to craft not just a new dish, but an entire philosophy around her culinary art. Yet, as they planned further, a flicker of apprehension crept back in. What if her concept, so integral to her personal insight, was met with more skepticism from others? What if it still felt insufficient? She recalled Simon's critique, the fear that lingered in the air every time she laid her dreams bare for scrutiny. Would she emerge triumphant from this process, or would her determination once again waver under the weight of doubt? The conversation turned toward methods of testing her new ideas. Clara suggested a series of smaller gatherings with friends and fellow chefs, where Sarah could share her dishes and refine them through feedback before stepping into a more public arena. Face those fears head-on, Clara encouraged. This will help you solidify your voice and vision. That night, as Sarah prepared to sleep, her mind buzzed with excitement, fueled by possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. It was clear, the next phase of her journey had begun. But a persistent thought hung over her. Would she manage to thread the needle between her past and her aspirations, or would she encounter greater challenges than before? Tomorrow, as she faced her past influences and future hurdles, she prepared to confront a question much larger than the flavors on her plate. What would happen when she stepped into the revealing light of judgment once again? The sun rose brightly the next morning, casting warm shafts of light through the diner windows, illuminating the kitchen where Sarah had spent so many days fighting for her culinary survival. Today, however, felt different. Today marked the beginning of her metamorphosis, a rebirth both in her culinary journey and personal identity. Determined, Sarah gathered the ingredients for her dish. With Clara's insightful feedback from yesterday echoing in her mind, she felt an exhilarating mix of anticipation and purpose. She would prepare the clam chowder, this time stripping it back to its essentials, allowing each element to shine while seamlessly blending the nuances of her heritage with modern techniques. She envisioned the transformation, a warm, inviting dish with an unexpected sophistication, a narrative that grew from her history but unfolded in a contemporary context. As she seasoned and stirred, Sarah carved out a new vision for herself. Not just a chef, but an artist, bravely showcasing her identity through flavors. Every chop and stir filled her with resolve. It was time to see beyond the scrumptious surface. Clara arrived as Sarah finessed the last touches, her praise filling the kitchen. Now, this looks like it tells a story. Let's hope Simon agrees, Sarah replied, a nervous thrill surging through her. Gone was the self-doubt that often clouded her vision. Instead, she harnessed each experience, fusing them all into her culinary expression. They made their way to the presentation table in the meeting room. Sarah arranged her dish meticulously, taking a deep breath as she absorbed the energy radiating from Clara's support. It was time to unveil the essence of her culinary identity and the legacy that had shaped her. "I'm ready," she said, the confidence resonating through her voice as she set the chowder in front of Simon. He scrutinized the dish, his expression curious. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the weight of Sarah's aspirations resting on this one moment. "This chowder celebrates a balance of flavors," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Each ingredient reflects personal memories, fresh clams to honor my coastal roots, a hint of smoked paprika for warmth, recalling family gatherings at home. I wanted to marry tradition with innovation." Simon took his time, thoroughly contemplating every aspect of the flavors and presentation. Sarah's heart raced, a whirlwind of excitement and terror spinning within her. Would he recognize the depth of her growth, the harmony she aimed to achieve? As Simon lifted the spoon, the room fell into silence. He savored the first bite thoughtfully, his brow furrowing into concentration. Finally, he set the spoon down, a glimmer of approval in his gaze. "It's much improved, Sarah. I see depth and complexity, but you still have room to refine," he noted. Sarah's heart soared, catching a glimpse of a new reality, validation for her efforts that were once dismissed. "What do you suggest?" she asked, leaning into his feedback, eager to grow further. "Let's build more on this concept. Your flavors are compelling. Let's highlight them even more in future presentations." With each word, Sarah felt the weight of pressure lifting. This was affirmation not just for her dish, but for her journey as a chef. In that moment, surrounded by Clara's encouragement and Simon's unexpected respect, she realized she had transformed from a passive participant to an active creator of her destiny. Days turned into weeks as Sarah fully embraced her new approach, refining dishes that blended her history with innovative twists. Collaborating with Clara energized their workspace, each dish capturing flavors of nostalgia while inviting exploration. Sarah felt competent in her vision and fueled by the desire to push boundaries. Finally, the day of a planned tasting dinner approached, an opportunity to unveil her menu to locals, food critics, and culinary enthusiasts. She paced the kitchen, gearing up for the event that felt like the culmination of months of hard work and growth. With each course plated, she marveled at the transformation. The dishes didn't just tell her story, they echoed the ambiance of warmth and comfort she was fighting to rekindle. The nerve-splitting tension leading up to the event faded as she gathered energy from the guests arriving, their excited chatter creating a symphony in the air. As Sarah moved throughout the dining area, sharing her tales behind each course, she recognized a profound shift within herself. No longer constrained by doubt or the corporate machine, she embraced sharing her narrative through the art of cooking. The evening concluded with resounding applause, patrons praising her creativity and uniqueness. Sarah stood flabbergasted, tears of joy welling in her eyes. She felt a powerful satisfaction wash over her. She had achieved more than just culinary validation. Overcoming her struggles transformed her into a confident culinary storyteller, defined by her heritage and ambition. As she took a step back to savor the moment, the connection between her journey and those she served solidified. This journey of resilience had birthed true fulfillment, a passion reclaimed and shared. Sarah had not just conquered her challenges, she had emerged as a recognized and respected force in her field, forever changed and steadfast in her identity. Now was the moment, perhaps the most important of all. Don't wait even one more second to share this triumph with your friends. You need to subscribe now to the channel to stay updated on similar inspiring stories of courage and triumph. Leave a like now to help support the growth of this channel, as it makes a difference we can all feel. And don't forget, comment your reactions about Sarah's incredible journey and what you might do to reclaim your passions. Together, let's spread inspiration and empowerment. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful transformation.